Hello and good people. Hello and well, we're back. I was going to say hello and we're back, but I got derailed by good people. Like, subscribe, share. What do you do? Comment. I'm pretty confident by the middle of the year at least, when I get serious about perhaps writing a book, that I'll have a way to shill Patreon, and I have sort of neglected my website, but what can you do? I will start working on it as soon as possible. You know, when you commit to something and then you're sort of like afraid of going forward with it. So it's a really stupid and sort of adolescent fear, but it's the truth. I mean, hey, it's the truth. And it's what I wanted to talk about. This is another impromptu Twitter based cheap and easy content thread. But what I wanted to talk about here is not the usual, my last two videos. Instead of savagely and viciously critiquing something, you come across something that, you can only be in awe of. And when you come across something that has a sort of genuine sentiment that is very insightful, and even if the insights aren't like totally 100%, this is authentic, this is the real thing, this is important for our time, uh does not mean that things don't have value. But of course, I do think that this thread here has value and is important and speaks to our time, and it's a very controversial thread, and it needs to be, the subject matter needs to be met with this sort of seriousness that can sort of easily lend itself to a lot of frustrations that young men feel. But hopefully you can learn these lessons in a way that doesn't produce bitterness, but a greater depth. You can be grateful for these insights, and you can produce in yourself a sort of greater self-awareness, a greater understanding of these different interactions between social technologies and technology proper, as if there's a distinction between the two. So because we live in the age of technology, we live in the age of enframing, revealing. There is a lot of different concurrent phenomenons and realities that are hitting us all at once, especially the largest demographic that inhabits the internet, which is mostly young men. So this thread here, I'm going to read and give comment to. It's by my good friend, a mutual, Egg Report, Randy. He recently wrote a very good, let me just, here, really quickly, on his Medium. If you go to his page here, and you go to Medium, this one, dating advice for the modern serial killer. Now, it's not what you think. It's very insightful. I mean, there's, of course, critiques of it. I was going back and forth with another very close friend of mine on Telegram about it, but it is a very good read. It's like, it just hits you like a ton of bricks. And, as someone, I'm not ashamed to admit I don't have very much, personal experience in this regard, but I do empathize with a lot of what he's writing about, and a lot of that, I would say, there's very interesting literature that has come out of weird internet subcultures in the manosphere, in particular. And people look at writers like Delicious Tacos, like, Kill to Party, my good friend, Bad Boy Billy Pratt. They look at those writers and like, oh, those people, they just hate women and it's all about fucking. And it's like, no, it's like there's a deeper sentiment. This, I feel, is a natural progression of that style of writing with social analysis. But this isn't what I wanted to talk about, because you could literally, go on forever and ever about this article here. What I really wanted to talk about, let me go back to it, is the thread that he made at the beginning of December. And I don't know why, but I liked this one, but then Twitter, for some reason, I guess, decides to unlike things. I don't know. It's really strange. So he's responding. This is about, okay, so just to give a quick a QRD anticipation of this, he's very similar in, but I would say in a more forthright, reactionary, right wing sort of fashion. He comes to a lot of similar conclusions that other people, such as meme analysis, when they talk about internet analysis in general, meme analysis, Don Jolly. I don't know, like it's really funny how I don't know, maybe it's just me, but like me, meme analysis, and Don Jolly, we kind of look similar. I mean, I'm probably the fattest of the three, but we look how we have like that same like physiognomy, same like beard goatee thing going on, curly hair. I don't know. It's just weird. It's weird. Anyways, by the way, I hope he watches this. As much as I disagree with some of his particular takes in regards to politics, meme analysis, I think his work has been invaluable, especially when it comes to viewing internet culture through an archetypal Jungian depth psychology lens. And what he talks about, and specifically, we all have our concepts that we like to, claim that we invented. With me, it's like neoliberal kitsch. But he came up with a concept, although I wouldn't say it's not wholly original, but he certainly has the most original analysis and take on it. He calls it the digital anima, how the internet itself is a womb like feminine entity, even though it was created by Silicon Valley nerds, or what was the buzzword back in the Gamergate days? Misogynerds. The internet is fundamentally a feminine entity that coddles and acts as a longhouse mother, to use the BAP term, towards young men in particular. So Egg Report is doing very similar, but I would say more explicitly right wing. And, he touches on some very, very hot topics. Hot topics. He touches on some very controversial takes, but I feel that these takes are important. And I'm not going to do the whole ridiculous, I don't co-sign on all of that, if you know who I'm talking about. I'm going to just say that the way he words things can appear controversial and quote unquote misogynistic, but it's not. For the people who are critical of that, if you can look past that and actually see what Egg Report's trying to say, I feel it's invaluable. So let's go to the main event. We've done the mid card. The jobbers have been expelled from the arena. Now we're going to the meat and potatoes. Main event, championship belt on the line. Uh, God, I view all of reality through wrestling metaphors. And if I'm stuttering a little bit, it's just because it's later at night, and I wanted to feel comfortable enough to read a thread and do something that I feel is commenting upon it, instead of just doing your base, like, I'm going to read this amazing thread I found. Because and maybe I'll do this in the future with Zero HP Lovecraft or some other very prolific Twitter thread man. But here we go. The problem so he's responding to this tweet about Elliot Page. There you go. So that's the changed Wikipedia. And Wikipedia is run by, I forget who it was. I think it was Thomas777, where I said that I don't actually believe that, Wikipedia is run by any, like, it's not edited by people. It's rather, it depends. Like, it's probably just a cabal of people that, like, this very small cabal of people that run and edit Wikipedia pages. I remember the Gamergate page had the similar, like, revisionist. It was like the cultural Marxism page. That was a big thing back in 2016 when they put it into, like, the Frankfurt conspiracy subcategory. So yeah, that's the letter. You all know, you all read it, huh? And this is the Goebbels quote: "There will come a day when all lies will collapse under their own weight, and triumph will, and truth will again triumph." So, but Egg Report is doing something totally different than this take by Joseph Goebbels. Not a take by Joseph Goebbels, by this Goebbels quote, but the implication being that, the typical normie conservative, well, if enough people see how ridiculous things are, then things are going to change. It's not, oh my God. We've been saying this since what, 2014, 2015? It hasn't happened yet. So Randy's thread, Egg Report. The problem we're having is that the current iteration of the internet is inherently feminine, and what is expressed and understood as neutral cultural issues are a product of everyone being forced within intra-female discourse, something we don't quite yet have a word for. It's difficult to express the problem exactly because it's a confusion between what is concrete and real, quote unquote, what is ethereal and psychological, which don't have a set dictionary for expressing without statement being equally difficult. Basically, if you can imagine such a thing, all of the real world, external from all psychological judgments and so on, now takes place within a bubble of intra-female communication. What we perceive and treat as a cultural artifact is, for the lack of a better term, gossip. Hot goss. And okay, so what he's getting at is that you're trying to claim that reality should have this base justification, this, what did Plantinga call it? Warranted true belief, I guess. Yeah, that's the term for it. That there needs to be a level of objective, empirical, rationalistic basis for analyzing different events and structures of civilization itself and natural phenomenon and so forth. And what happens is when the majority, in fact, probably I would say, at least in the Western world, I would say it's coming around to good 80 to 90% of communication happens through the mediation of digital technology. So imagine, if you will, a graph, all right? Now imagine all discourse is enveloped by a bigger circle of internet and digital simulation and what Heidegger calls enframing, which is the final step of the revealing of being as hyperconnectivity. And that's not what he says, but it's the final step of truly coming into the full presence of being that makes it, that robs it of its unique truth capacity, what Heidegger calls aletheia, which is, truth is revealing. So there's a lot of things going on here, and it comes up when he shares screen caps of direct messages. But basically, if the majority of internet communications happens within a, not what people think, but a predominantly feminine space of communication, where social signaling plus gossip, the currency of appearances, the mirage of social clout, all of those social considerations going into our quote unquote perceptions of truth and discourses that create those perceptions of truth. Therefore, you have a reality where the vast majority of people are entering a feminine space. But notice how Egg Report, and people can call this misogynistic and whatnot, he does in one way, but he doesn't directly demonize it the way some, like, less wrong, big yud rationalist, or like Sargon of Akkad skeptic, like No Mind, the way these midwits characterize it, like, well, what about objective facts and logic and science and all this, Ben Shapiro, like, Ben Shapiro gives you what's a ridiculous move? Ben Shapiro gives you a Canadian destroyer to an SJW college student off of a ladder through two tables with truth and facts and logic, and logic doesn't care, facts don't care about your feelings. That level is so juvenile because there's something more sophisticated going on. This is what people mean by, like, the manosphere people. I think they had some idea of it, although they were sort of blinded by a lot of their own insecurities and projections. And as we all were at one time, I'm not immune from this. When they talk about things like the gynocracy is a mass totalization of all social behavior or comportment, action and discourse towards a feminine space. It's not exactly a patriarchy. It's not exactly a matriarchy model in the way that like feminists like to talk, like rad femmes like to talk about the patriarchy. It's more of a decentralized, sum total social discourse. It is the image of thought that runs discourse in the internet age. It's the third order simulacra, what Baudrillard called it, which isn't untruth or not reality or fiction. It is more so there is a doubling effect of all things. There is a expression of virtuality, actuality, doubt, and truth. So all things are permeated with a layer of doubt and suspicion and forces of discourse that are not beholden to some, hyper rational Western, like, or should I say post rational, like post enlightenment discourse of naturalist truth or materialistic truth, which is, facts and logic and science and reason and materialism and so forth. It is more so a recognition that social values and social constructivism wins the day in a uniquely feminine space of discourse, which is the internet. So, hope I didn't give away too much because this thread really is worth paying attention to. So, okay, we must understand that these things as trying to adopt woke, blah, 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 is not a political statement. The content of the message is entirely superfluous and it cannot be understood literally because that's not the point. It doesn't matter whether a given thing is true or false. The only thing that matters is the impact, emotional, for lack of better term, you have on other women. That's what all postmodernism is, what everything boils down to. Paradigms as true, false, accurate, inaccurate, etc., are whether true or not, whether better or not, whether more useful or not. Inapplicable. I'm not saying this is to convince you. Convincing is also a useless paradigm. So when people like the rationalist, skeptic types, they like to furrow their brow and tip their fedora over this. And they say that, what do you mean that truth can be useful? Don't you agree that even if truth is the most inconvenient thing in the world, that it should be expressed, that it should be like studied upon and revealed, and facts don't care about your feelings? No, that's totally a willful denial of everything that we intuitively know about human nature, especially when it comes to the feminine, the collective unconscious, the anima, the collective feminine aspect of humanity that is, shot through the shadow self. So this is like, again, the dawn of the Longhouse Mother. Times of great chaos will bring about this uniquely feminine consciousness, the lunar consciousness, if you will. We are currently, because of the iPhone and the design philosophies of the entire app structure, so like, flat interface design, the appeal to normiedom, the colonization of internet by the normies is because of smartphone technology. It is the hyper acceleration, the threshold by which telecommunications got so sophisticated that people that did not have a proper understanding of what the early internet was all about, there was a conscious lowering of the barriers of entry to expand markets, essentially. And Egg Report will talk about that. So again, modern late capitalism has done away with these rituals and these barriers to entry that the old school, Californian ideology tech utopians once thought the internet was capable of. Now it's just like a marketing tool, but it's in a uniquely feminine space. So you'll see what he means. Okay. Because of entire app structure, always already within gossip. So smartphones produce hot goss, and hot goss degrades discourse like nothing else. Because the eye, the perception of the other, the gaze of the other is omnipresent within this gossip paradigm. There is no way of escaping this if you interact with any cultural artifact, because it's built right into the structure that enables it. So there isn't like this hidden space of pure, perfect discourse of objective rationality. That's a fantasy. That's a fantasy, especially nowadays that most communication is on the internet. Furthermore, it is for this reason that the only true political question of the day is the woman question. We are presented with a world that is within the feminine Weltanschauung. He meant to say Weltanschauung. And the reason everything is stupid and doesn't make sense and irritates you is because you are being incentivized to think like a woman. The internet makes you gay. It turns a freaking frogs gay. And it's a feature, not a bug. Oh. Imagine bug. I'm not gonna comment on that. Imagine you don't care about whether anything you say is true or not. Imagine that isn't even a real thing to you. It's beyond consideration. It's so unreal you haven't ever ever even heard about it, and you could imagine it. You could imagine it if you tried. Grok this mindset. She doesn't care about whether she's whatever the fuck. She only cares that it's efficient towards some end, which is opaque and unknown to us. Presumably, someone in her personal life annoyed her. Ooh, Cindy down the road said I don't look hot. sorry, no. To go off on a tangent on this, a little tangent. When I was younger, I was way younger, actually. I was in school. I was in elementary school. I don't know what they call it. I think in America you have a different thing, but basically, in the other Anglosphere, we call it elementary school. And basically, it's JK right up until grade 8, and you go off to high school. But in elementary school, I think I was in either grade 6 or 7. We watched Mean Girls, and when you're like a immature boy, I guess you could say, you really don't think about like, oh, I'm just watching you're not thinking in terms of I'm watching a profound statement of our generation. You're more so thinking about, stupid, oh, this is a chick flick, I don't want to watch it. And you don't pay attention to the subtle messaging behind it. Now, I know you could say that Mean Girls has like, quote unquote, like liberal messaging to it or whatever, but I truly believe, to further the story, years and years later, this was, I would say, 3 or 4 years ago, Mean Girls just happened to be on one of like the Stars movie channel or whatever. And I watched it with my mother. And I turned to my mother and I said, wow, when I was a kid, I hated this movie. I thought it was a girl's movie. I didn't like it. But now that I watched it again with, the miracle of hindsight, I truly believe that Mean Girls is a fundamental statement of the millennial generation. So like the Gen Xers had Heathers. I think that was the one. Although Gen X had a lot of like those teen, like Heathers, Breakfast Club. Would you say Girl Interrupted is too esoteric. So let's just say Heathers. Millennials had Mean Girls, and the message of Mean Girls is just, I highly recommend everyone go and watch Mean Girls. It is like, it doesn't matter how cringe it is nowadays, but the message still rings true. The social discourse of the millennial, and I think it's even, from what I hear, it's even worse with Zoomers. That vicious cycle of gossip, conjecture, but also the unique unraveling of one's personality within that that structure of adolescence. Now that is being carried out in perpetuity, into internet discourse. I forget who said it. It may have been Sean that said Twitter is like Mean Girls for incels. Well, it's kind of true, right? Because the same social dynamics, but even beyond like they're bullies and they're getting into a clique and all this stuff, even beyond like the surface level of a film like Mean Girls, it's a fundamental statement of all of what the youth face today in a hyper-connected world. But when you have children that refuse to grow up, but not like the boomer. Here's the thing. The boomers, they're in the same boat because I truly believe, I said this in a DM, I think a few days ago. The boomers are not the, what they like to portray themselves as, oh, well, you got to pick yourself up by your bootstraps, all that, corny cornball stuff. The last generation, the greatest generation, the World War II generation, I truly feel was the last generation to reach adulthood because the boomers experienced a time of temporary, mind you, temporary, post scarcity. And in those times of decadence, again, like, I know this is like cringe, I know this is like trad LARPing, whatever, but people like Evola, they talk about like the times of the reawakening of the lunar consciousness come about in times of great decadence and collapse and cultural decay, and that's for a specific reason. So now you see all of this quasi religious phenomenon going on that doesn't express itself in traditional religions or mystery cults or mysticism, but rather it is a inverted postmodern form of that. So, for example, consumer products like Cape Shit, Marvel Universe, you name it, like all of these mythologies, which are largely driven by boomers, they were created for the boomer generation. They keep you in a perpetual state of adolescence and a very simplistic form of religious expression because you buy into the lore, you consume it. There is sort of like moral political messaging there, obviously, especially nowadays, but it's not like it doesn't have the same expression, but that sentiment is still there, that fundamental sentiment and the fragmentation. And whenever society enters this time of fragmentation and decay and collapse and decadence, you have the rise of a uniquely feminine lunar consciousness. And that's not to say that you should, like, again, this was the mistake of Evola. You shouldn't eschew the feminine, but you should put it in its proper place, the way that the solar masculine should be put in its proper place. So anyways, that's just a really quick tangent. Not really quick, but so imagine you don't care about truth, about your words are signifying the signified of a reality, a tangible reality behind those words. She doesn't care about whether she's whatever the fuck. She cares only that it's efficient towards men. So again, the instrumentalization of discourse to get at an end is, it's not that she is lying for attention. Lying as a concept doesn't exist. She's just for attention. Fake news wasn't only coined by Hillary Clinton. It's literally the most ancient form of the feminine mindset, the female mindset. Donald Trump and perspectivism and relativism didn't kill objective truth and certainty like the way that these leftoids in the media, they like to think that. This is why, again, I could go on a tangent about how metamodernism is total cancer, but like in the same way, in that it's basically liberals coping in terms of finding like new sincerity to be like, well, and actually those evil right wingers, they don't value the truth. They don't want like Ben Shapiro truth bombs. They want sentiment and emotion, and they're like, well, that's inherently fascistic because fascism is about the totalization of emotional energy within society that doesn't have a coherent political message, and that's all bullshit. That's read like Mussolini's intellectuals, read other works that's discredit that like long held like Marx cell Varso cell theory cell analysis on the left, that fascism is like this upsurge of emotional energy. It doesn't have a coherent like platform or message or whatnot. But let's just concede the point. Let's just say that yes, there's an upsurge of emotion and emotional energy, and the whole edifice of truth and objective truth and science and post-enlightenment rationality that's been strung up on its own petard. This isn't a new thing that like Trumpism brought about, the post-truth thing. Like what did that really like low grade quarter wit, you could call him, Stephen Colbert, what was his word back in the day? Truthiness, something like again, these people, it's like this like media like talk show, political comedy talk show way of expressing the simulation of discourse, which all of these, like, people that read the New Yorker, they're like, oh my God, Stephen Colbert. But now all of that's forgotten. Now Donald Trump is the one, and Trumpism is the one who brought about the quote unquote post-truth era, which is just patently ridiculous. Not, I mean, he is a symptom of it, but he didn't bring it about. He is a part of it. He's in fact more a part of it than anyone else, even more than, certainly more than any other president, maybe, besides Reagan, but that's neither here nor there. Donald Trump and perspectivism and relativism didn't kill objective truth and certainty. Forcing all human cognition to take place within inter-female gossip did. It's only as true as it is useful. This is why I say all advertisement is towards women. The intended reader for all advertisement is a woman. And thanks to the structure of internet mega companies whose entire business is built on shaky, inflated ad revenue models. Again, they say that the internet itself is built on the ad model, is that literally everything is an ad. Read my blog, subscribe to my Substack, blah, 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 etc., so forth. You know why 10 years of owning the libs online did absolutely nothing, and CIA World Order is stronger than ever? You thought you were playing Truth or Dare when you were playing Gossip, and you didn't even know the rules. So again, that's a very staggeringly important point. It's one that these people, these like hangers-on from the Gamergate days, they don't understand this whatsoever. It doesn't matter that, oh, look at these SJWs, look at, they're trying to make you believe crazy things, because you're not ready to cope with the framework that produced those discourses to begin with. You just want to will it away and say that, modernity, Western civilization within modernity took certain paths and went on certain intellectual and trajectories and sentiments that have led to the present. It's like, no, it's just denying that. It's going back to some like bullshit classical liberal, like early 19th century model of rationality that doesn't exist anymore. So here are these DMs. So, I think we are living under total gossip. Like, gossip has taken over our politics and replaced genuine inquiry. People don't realize it. I think the term like cancel culture fall flat. It's because it doesn't really get through to the heart of which is that it is all comes from elevating the significance and power of gossip, and then making parallel institutions and shit for it. It's so funny, man. I mean, it's almost certainly a result of woman question. So in your face, like, believe women literally just means replace the rules of your legal system with the rules of gossip. I think this is a piece of puzzle, our technology in the Land Kaczynski sense in Heidegger. I've posted some vague idea about it before. Basically, Heidegger's, again, this is a DM, so don't expect good spelling or grammar, at-handedness as how wielding a tool changes one being / access perception at the deepest level. Again, so readiness to hand. You only experience a consciousness of that tool, the tool value, the tool tooling, when it breaks, when it collapses. Interface design, app theory, smartphones, and social media / internet 3.0 at the deepest level. Kaczynski is not directly on this, but I think his general social analysis fits perfectly. For me, is the first and foremost a technological issue. Everything else is downstream from the design of information technology. So again, so this is like what I talk about often in different places. When you talk about the difference between Web 1.1 and Web, now Web 3.0, it's different because all barriers to entry has been lowered, and all interaction on the internet has been corralled into select places that are very easy for normies to get involved in. Your grandma can have a Facebook now. Therefore, the barriers to entry have collapsed in on themselves, but also the use and the interface itself of internet technology. Like, why do you think all social media companies, why do they fundamentally have the same features? Why do they look the same? Why do they have the same flat design? Why do they have the same white screen? Because it's very easy to corral people, large groups of the population, into specific forms of interaction that are advantageous to whatever corporate agenda is present. And I would say even behind that, there is some intangible, metaphysical, malevolent force behind that. So that's my just quick schizo post. I don't think anyone set out to create this environment. So again, this is a discourse, this is the way things develop because of like the logic of markets and so forth. I think they are set out to maximize for a cheap advertisement and accidentally stumbled into it, and just so happens to mirror intersexual female competition somewhat. So again, this is like, go back, like, okay, ignore the cringe of like the PUA pickup artist stuff and like these like, human biodiversity nerds that talk about like biological difference. Like a lot of stuff is valid, but it's not to the point. If you could separate like the nerdy, like what would you say, that type of like, manosphere discourse from the actuality of what is true, then you'll see the picture very quickly. Advertising as an industry, in theory, in my view, is basically PUA 0.5. It's deliberately trying to exploit social and behavioral weaknesses in human beings. So again, pickup artistry is like acknowledging those facts, but then weaponizing them to get laid, essentially, which is not productive. It's like you're consenting to the thing that you hate the most. But that's another video. That's another video about pickup artistry. And human beings, making a science of exploiting weakness in evolutionary behavioral blind spots. So all PR, all advertising is basically this. It's exploiting the deepest human weaknesses and the deepest recesses of your mind. And the reason we're at where we're at culturally is that all culture now takes place in an environment, the internet, that is fundamentally built on advertising bucks. It seeps in from every direction. So why is all advertising almost inherently feminine and speaks to the demands of women? So the reason, again, I hate to say it, but the reason advertising is woke, the reason now you have polyamory, things like polyamory in advertising, like that Volkswagen commercial recently, not all families are the same, is because, again, these things are by and large supported and championed by women. So it's more complex than that. There's reasons for this. I don't want to get into like an anti-woman screed, obviously, but it's just that the majority of the political activity and the narratives formed in society on a political basis, and the majority of social political policy is by and large determined by women, by and large determined by white women who have the largest share. The affluent white liberal females have the largest percentage of consumer spending power than even white men. So there you go. I believe that statistic is true. I'm not going to like go and like look up a statistic, but I have a good feeling it's pretty much true. The internet is 100% on ad money. Where does the value come from? Why is this economy viable? How does the investment turn a profit? Silicon Valley is a hub for advertisement firms, not for technology. Calling it technology is just advertisement. So, sorry. There you go. Here we go. How does the male use of language? It's almost over, so don't worry about it. How does the use of male language differ from the female? I gather that the opposite of implication of women using language purely as a tool removed from actual meaning, truth, fact is that this makes linguistic space purely ideal. So again, a lot of women that are, I don't mean to go Jordan Peterson, but they're higher in agreeableness. They will create spaces where, and they've done studies on this, where women will actually lie to spare people from harsh truths or inconvenient facts or whatever. Like that stupid thing that they tried to normalize recently. This was like last year or 2 years ago or whatever. Was it 2 years ago or last year? Where they said, are you in a mental space where you're prepared to hear prepared to hear discouraging information or offensive information or something like that? I forget, but you know what I'm talking about. Basically like trigger warnings, I guess. I don't know. That's, again, I try to avoid that stuff as much as possible nowadays, because that's sort of like, that's so dead. Again, like the Egg Report really said it, that discourse is so dead. It's so trite. It's so 2016. It's so 2015. That's so like anti-SJW YouTubers having sick feminist own compilations, and it's just that stuff didn't work. And notice how all of that stuff was swept away within a few years of Donald Trump because it didn't work. Like I even tweeted about this. I should find the tweet now that I remember. I think I was responding to ZHP about like all of that stuff back in the day. It's all gone now because like that wasn't effective. That was not, it wasn't aware of the true nature of social discourse on the internet. So as much as these tech nerds that were swept up in this like to talk about how much, because they play video games all day, that they really understand the internet, it's not the case. So I gather the opposite implication: women using language. So it's that is concerned with language as a vehicle for truth, meaning fact. Putting in a strict gender box like I did is exactly accurate. I try to get in a little later. Okay, so women to women language, intersexual competition, intersexual communication. Like in the way that you have a different tone when you're just hanging out with a group of guys compared to a mixed company. You have a certain tone or model of communication when it's just the fellas, which a woman could never be fully included in. Just the inverse of that. The female unique mode of communication, which we could never fully comprehend from the inside, we can only describe it from the outside, looking in, where I call it gossiping, for lack of a better term. And I'm being provocative in my word choice just because I'm trying to be funny / a misogynist in real life, which might cloud the clarity of what I'm trying to express. Yeah, a criticism of this thread, I would say, is that, yeah, it's like you're singling out women, and that's inherently anathema nowadays to single out one gender as having unique traits, because nowadays we have this illusion. Again, this is like another weaponization of discourse within this uniquely feminine space, this appeal to equality in all things, that, this is why the anti-SJWs, they lost from the start, because they consented to this. The OG, it's just about ethics and gaming journalism. So and I'm being provocative. I don't mean to say that women can't think rationally or speak on a literal level about truth / meaning / facts. I'm saying when they talk to each other, they don't. More female CEOs. And because all advertisement is aimed at women, because women are the biggest spenders in capitalism, and all journalism and all content on the internet has been reduced to being nothing more than ads within ads within ads, then all communication on the internet is now within this linguistic space. So it's like when people say the left can't meme, the left like has words, that's their memes. It's because they're trying to, well, that's another video entirely. Again, that's like, I should go into why the left can't meme. But essentially, it conforms to this communication on the internet in certain like hyper political woke, quote unquote woke groups, that you have to be sure that you're covering all bases, because you're high in agreeableness, you're high in social interaction, you're high in extroversion, and you're trying to, for the harmony of the quote unquote group, you're sacrificing brevity and directness for the recognition of everyone's particular stance in life. So, and as men is difficult to recognize because it is literally invisible to us and is difficult to articulate. All e-drama, e-drama is very feminine, I gotta say. And people that, not to name names, but people that make their bones on e-drama, I hate to say it, it's a very effeminate type of thing. All e-drama, all content, no matter how masculine or whatever the subject and the people involved, simply by being online becomes gay catty self-advertisement. is possibly more commonly called grifting and shilling. But your point that is all uniquely an online problem, and it only spills over into the real world, in my opinion, it's that mechanism, it's the mechanics of over-socialization. It's how it comes about. So Ted Kaczynski's concept of over-socialization, people that will literally die for the system, they can't imagine a way out of it. People that conform 100% to the discourses that are allowed and accepted in society, and the behaviors and the choice of employment and the choice of lifestyle and the consent to the system itself is, and technology breeds this over-socialization. Ted Kaczynski goes into this. Technology is a conveyor for over-socialization, because now in this hyper-connected world, and in a world where people are disconnected from natural abilities, because like McLuhan said, every time technology progresses, another attribute of human nature, atrophies and wears off. So now that people can't live without hypercommunication, it just breeds more over socialization. It breeds more justification. So now, to be a dissident, to think outside of the system and to think outside of allowable opinion is seen as totally anathema, and people will police themselves. They will, what does Arthur Chu call it? He said, like, you have to mind kill yourself. People will mind kill themselves of dissident thoughts to preserve a level of over socialization within themselves. So again, like Wilhelm Reich said, like the not Wilhelm Reich, but he was part of it. But Deleuze said like about the micro-fascist within you, when in actuality it's the micro technological civilized, techno-capital civilization within you that is the voice of over socialization. So it's not even close to being an all-woman problem. That's just a poor word choice on my part because I'm trying to be funny and ironic and catty to get likes and follows. Gay, catty self-promotion, self-advertisement, clout. So again, Egg Report, he's recognizing that this language itself is quote unquote, I know I'm using the term quote unquote problematic because it's provocative, but it's not necessarily a woman question. It's more of like, you have to separate the actuality, the being of woman, with the feminine itself as an archetypal metaphysical force. So this isn't singling out, yes, all women, and it's not singling out women. It's more, it's commenting on forces that are more ancient than we can, ever possibly know, but now are coming into a very weird space and very weird, these archetypal forces are coming out in the internet age in strange ways because they're being mediated through this techno-capital interface overlay of hyper-communicative social arrangements. Let's put it that way. So again, communicative action, which is, the Habermas thing. But anyways, I'm just being a theory cell. I don't think it's about finding a girl who thinks in a masculine way. Yeah, that's so stupid. Like, I want an ideal GF who thinks exactly like me and who has, the same male-orientated opinions I do. Like, I want to find a perfect woman, herp, like, whatever. This paradigm is obsolete. I think it's about finding a girl who isn't a dopamine addicted porn brain, who isn't addicted to the machine. And so pornography doesn't just mean like the sexual aspect of being. It means like something, the pornographic nature of social media is gratuitous. It is a revealing of the self in a gratuitous, profane, unsacred way that is revealing your inner being in very crass, bombastic, nothing's left to be revealed type of terms. That is why social media is pornographic. This is the also terminology. You don't have to watch porn to be a porn brain in my worldview. Women have daddy issues because daddy didn't love them. We're porn brain before the internet even existed. Yeah, weak boomer men. That, what I can go on and on about that. It's all just different not all boomer men, of course, obviously. I'm not, there's a lot of like very good white, mostly blue collar boomer men. Yeah, but I noticed the best ones, they're like the later boomers, the Ronald Reagan generation, like my parents' generation, that they weren't like the original boomers. They were like the people that got screwed over by their older siblings. They're the first ones to be denied the pension checks in in old age because the boomers, their older siblings sucked everything up. So women have daddy issues because daddy didn't love them. We're porn brain before the internet even existed. It's all just different manifestations of being a mature, emotionally well-adjusted adult in a different technological environments. It's just that being a reasonable and well-adjusted adult and even less frequent in women than it is in men, despite the propaganda about weak men and all that stuff and how men don't mature quickly, blah, blah, blah. The narrative that men are weak and men need to be man up, etc., just sells better because women are the primary purchasers in capital. So it's like those articles, about how men like have just totally suffered in the job market in the past few years, especially with the Chinese imported delicacy. Women most affected. That article about like it's affecting women's marriage prospects. Um, because women are the primary purchasers in capital, and all advertisement is geared towards a hypothetical feminine viewer, female viewer. Okay. Last one. When Jordan Peterson tells you to man up and marry that slut and buy his books, that sounds like he's talking to the male audience, but he's talking to the female and the male audience. So the anima, again, the feminine part of the masculine, um, the shadow part of the masculine is being mediated through the anima, the feminine part of the self. There is a very distorted relationship that men have towards women nowadays in modernity, and therefore the feminine, the anima part, is fundamentally being filtered through the shadow, through the disequilibrium, through the unmediated, unintegrated contents of the psyche that one could perceive as evil or whatnot. But Jung doesn't. Jung has more neutral terms than that. But basically, what we're seeing now is that Jordan Peterson's talking to the feminine part of the male psyche and saying that, yes, you have to conform to this over socialization that is fundamentally driven by the feminine part of like social considerations and greater discourses of harmony and equality, and don't rock the boat because you're going to offend people, blah, blah, blah. You know the drill. The language between men isn't focused on rational truth, etc. either. It's usually focused on the material and the physical world. So again, you're better off being married to someone, like what's the old manosphere terms? You all know them. Post-wall, carousel. Sexual market value, as I've said before, is like, I don't like that word. It doesn't really get to the heart of attractiveness, but it breaks down things in this like quantifiable rationalistic gaze that I don't think is proper when it comes to human relations. But that's just me. But a good convenient shorthand would be like sexual market value, SMV. It's usually focused on the material and physical world. If there's a gender distinction, I wouldn't say one is truth, rationality, Ben Shapiro, and the other is emotions. I'd say one is primarily physical, material, practical, and the other is social. Neither are primarily concerned with truth. So again, men, they equally have this capacity towards, quote unquote, untruth or alternative facts. It's just that it's in a different headspace than with women. Truth comes later, not before. So again, this whole thing about truth being objective and scientific and materialistic, that's all crap, because the way we operate, the human interface, the being of beings, human qua being itself does not operate within those, relatively recent, I would say, phenomenon. Because even the Greeks, when they talk about, the origins of like Greek rationality, it was, the logos and things like that is fundamentally different than like what these, nerds think it is. So truth comes later, not before. Wittgenstein's primary example of language in philosophic investigations are of men working in a factory environment. Words are directions and instructions. Bring me a slab of metal, cut this thing, hammer that thing. Simply saying the word slab or in the right environment communicates an instruction. Bring me a certain object. Investigating truth comes much later, after many layers of abstraction and folding language in on itself. Investigating truth using language is the folding of the steel 100 times to make a katana of language. Investigating truth using language. Yeah. So again, this is like the nature of communication itself isn't purely this rationalistic, what would you say, utilitarian endeavor that aims at a very physical, stark, material truth. So again, another good long-time follower of mine, Crown Caribou, he says male internet is output, female is about getting input. It's the same with cable connections, and this is not an accident. This is why websites like Stack Exchange and formerly Wikipedia were possible. Not anymore. I agree with that take. Basically, again, this is like what Deleuze says in the Societies of Control, that the subject is rendered into, it's beyond biopower. It's beyond the regimentation and the production of life itself. It's more of the production of life is now becoming an output mechanism for information. That information is used and stored by power to gain access into the heart of being itself. And basically, the societies of control in this thread would be a uniquely gynocentric, gynocric, feminine space, because digital technology breeds a feminine consciousness that, meme analysis would say it smothers the male psyche with abstractions, with perpetual, basically the wirehead. So men consume, women drive consumerism, but men consume in a different way. The wireheading society of perpetual hedonic treadmill, strap a wire to my brain and sink me into like digital simulation forever, become a human battery. It's not exactly there yet. The VR technology is coming, but it's more so the wirehead idea of the societies of control give you an incentive to be coddled by digital telecommunication technology, by hypermedia, by hyperpolitics, by everything coming at you at this blend of emotion, sentiment, half fact, half narrative, literature, visual, somatic, these information spheres hitting you all at once. They are a product of the unique capacity of the feminine to feel a totality of being. It doesn't have any separation involved. There isn't a differentiation between the different levels of what we concern ourselves with, what is called truth and fact, and this is emotion, this is fact. So again, the Ben Shapiro types, they want to categorize everything, but when you engage in a uniquely feminine space, therefore, it is not easy to separate things, nor would you want them to. And so, in a way, I think this very insightful thread by Randy Eggreport is saying that you can't deny the fact that we live in a gynocric space, a gynocentric space in the internet, and we have to come to terms with female intersexual social dynamics that men struggle with. And it's not necessarily bad or evil, or like women or this incelish type of like, oh, women are bad and evil, they're distorting my mind. It's more of a recognition of the various trends and the steps that were made, and the logic of markets and the logic of technological development in the Western world. And in a way, it uses this very hyper rationalistic endeavor. The feminine uses the feminine anima, the shadow anima uses this hyper male centric rationalistic endeavor, which is technology and like, learn to code and all that stuff. It's using like the nerd fantasy against itself. So, the internet for a time in its adolescence was a very male centric space, but it was only to test the waters, to envelop both men and women within a mono consciousness that is swallowing civilization whole. And the more we talk about it, the more it's very difficult to express what I'm trying to say, because it's very easy to like Ted K post, to Uncle Ted post, but the more this technological, techno-capital apparatus of the societies of control go on, the more that the conformity to like very female centric modes of communication that is inevitably mixed with woke politics, because women are the social antigens of change nowadays, or rather they are allowed to be by the the powers that be, whatever you want to call them. They're allowed to be the social antigens that provoke a response, that produce change. It's just like the other day, like that stupid tweet about like young Democrat versus young Republican. It was that, well, I don't even know her name. I forget her name. The slam poet that became a poet laureate at Joe Biden's inauguration. And it's like this just platitude upon platitude. If you actually read the poem, it's just to deserve like a Harvard education and being a poet laureate up there with like, think of all the great American poets, Walt Whitman, Ginsberg. Think of all the great, American literature, the poets. And it's like, if you have this like very cheap, like very inclusive social messaging and you hit all the right demographic buttons, then the objective truth of like what is like a great work of art, even like women artists, like, you know, take this poem, this very long drawn out slam poem that was probably written, like, I don't even know, I'm not going to accuse her of plagiarism, but like, you know, it's like that poem that what was it that Ashley Judd read during the Women's March from that like 17-year-old. It's like, you know, that the parent probably like wrote half of that. Not to accuse this girl, not girl, she's like 23 years old, my god, but she was sold as like a teenager by the media. So it's just that, you know, when you use metrics of like objective truth and like what makes art more beautiful or more harmonious or better or more technical, those considerations are almost gone. Because like, okay, you can look at that poem, compare that to like any random poem by Emily Dickinson, and it's just like, you can't do it. You can't. Like it's just like I'll give you an example. Let me go to the screen share. Let me find this really quick. Okay. Let me I actually have an Emily Dickinson book right next to me. So screen share. Okay, we're back. And let me go to Joe Biden. Biden inauguration poem. Bimbo Twitter. Oh shit. Search results. Poem The Hill We Climb. In full. No, not this is not it. Come on. Let's see. The Hill We Climb. Okay, read Amanda Gorman's inauguration poem. She does look young. She just looks younger than a lot of 23-year-olds I know or knew, you know. When days come, we ask, where can we find light, never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea must wade. We brave the belly of the beast. We learn that quiet isn't always peace. Oh yeah, shout it. Norms and notions. Yet the dawn is ours. Before we knew it, somehow, yeah, the dawn is ours. Oh yeah, the dawn is yours now. Yeah, look at, there's even a Twitter account, Biden supporters posting their L's. Somehow we've withered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken. Yeah, right. Oh my God. But simply unfinished. We the successors of a country in time. We're a skinny black girl. So again, this is like a hallmark of slam poetry is like this direct acknowledgement of like your identity and status in the world. Descended from slaves and raised by a single mother. Oh yeah. Oh. Can dream of becoming president, only to find yourself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine. But that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We're striving to forge a union with purpose. Perfect purpose. Oh, I get it. Ooh. To compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, and character. Oh, yeah. So I guess you want to turn America into Canada. And so we lift our gaze down. Okay, you get the point. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew. Even as we hurt, we hoped. This is all just generic platitudes. This means nothing. That even as we tried, we tried. Tired, we tried. Oh, tired, we tried. Ooh, alliteration. Ooh, is that what it's called? Alliteration. That will forever be tied together, victorious. Except for those evil, nasty, racist Trump supporters. Not because we will ever again know defeat, because we will never again sow division. Oh yes, healing. What did Joe Biden call healing the soul of America? Like, oh my God, never again sow division. Are you kidding me? These people want blood? Are you kidding me? So you have to have like the American, like, you know, scripture tells us. So again, this is like a biblical, like Protestant literalism. To envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our time, then victorious won't lie in the... Okay, going on. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, oh my God, they delayed democracy for 4 years until we elected Joe Biden. It can never be permitted permanently defeated. Oh, except for, let's see, every other time in human history, every other time, so-called democracies that were flimsy to begin with, they tend not to last, and that some form of authoritarianism is actually the norm. And in fact, the ancient forms of democracy you would consider authoritarian by your like weak, mushy liberal metric. Whatever. This is like, again, the American like manifest destiny, but only like liberal. Like, I know I'm like totally getting off the topic of the thread, but like this is a good example I wanted to use. Is this faith we trust for while we have our eyes of future history? Yeah, what future? The era of redemption, we feared its inception. We don't feel prepared to be hires of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power. So yeah, very, very Pantera, a new level of confidence to author a new chapter. I'm having too much fun with this. To offer hope and laugh to ourselves. Ooh, nice. Live, laugh, love. So the mushy, like, Bill Clinton post Cold War liberalism is here again with Obama, because his consciousness doesn't reach far back beyond the Obama era. The 90s are too rare for the average 23-year-old slam poet. How can we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now, catastrophe. How can catastrophe possibly prevail over us? Well, it has, and it has. It always will. And don't, that's not a black pill per se, because God has promised us that catastrophe will come, but through catastrophe comes revelation. We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be. Yeah. The end of history, you mean? Events happen, but history ceases. A country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We know where. Yeah, this is such claptrap. Oh my god. But because we know inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Oh, the Zoomers! Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might. How is so? Again, it's like they hate us for our freedoms. What was the Reagan one? If you shall ensure peace, prepare for war. Freedom is slavery, all this stuff. Then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. Yeah, what children? Who's going to have children in the future? So let us leave behind a country better than the one we left with. Oh my God. Every breath from my bronze pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will raise the golden limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the will-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. Oh, revolution. This is again like American like Gnostic narrative about itself. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwest states, and we will some like South, blah blah blah. Every corner called our country, but our people diverse and beautiful, our marriage battered and beautiful, tattered and torn, Slipknot. sorry, battered and beautiful. I love like slam poetry. There is this unique literature conceit where they have to like have this motif where they're like, we're broken, but we're overcoming, and it's like that whole like I'm like a hot mess. Like it's very millennial centric type of things. I hate to say it, but Zoomers are being infected with millennial consciousness, and millennials took the lead from their older Gen X siblings. When days come, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. This is like a Scott Steiner promo almost, like about when they climb the mountain of Freakzilla, they'll when I reach the top to Nirvana, they'll say that Big Papa Pump is your hookup. Aflame and unafraid, the new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light. If only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to see it. Oh, sorry. If only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. Wow. Let's see. Let me go to just like, I'm picking a book off of my shelf here. Let's see. Is this the Emily Carr book? I hope. Yes, it is. Judge Tenderly of Me, the poems of Emily Carr. I'm just flipping to a random page. Okay, so this one. My life closed twice before it's close. It yet remains to see if immortality unveil a third event to me, so huge, so hopeless to conceive, as these that twice befell, parting in all we know heaven, and all we need of hell. Wow. So that stanza alone just basically blew this out of the water. Here's another one. Here's another one. After 100 years, nobody knew the place, agony that enacted there, motionless as peace. Weeds triumphant ranged, strangers strolled and spelled, as the lone orthography of the elder dead. Winds of summer fields, recollect the wind, instinct picking up the key, dropped by memory. So this is a conceit of a place, of memory, of a culture, of a being that is confronted with its past self in the natural world. And in those very short stanzas alone, you could like it's just there's no comparison. But the point is not like to like totally rag on this like gripping poet laureate of our time, like you're right, Groupie Core. The point is more of like those considerations of talent and of objective artistic merit, like that they don't matter. It's not that they don't matter. It's just that when you bring up the argument, then people look at you because of the voice of over socialization. Like, what are you, some asshole? Art is subjective and art is based on taste. And so, not to like, I'm not like going into like a vulgar tratis screed about like this art is objective because it's like representational and all that stuff. I'm saying that there's something that animates the work of art that is beyond its own time, its own social milieu. But what happens is art is always the first victim of over socialization. And this is why, again, this is what Egg Report is talking about, the uniquely feminine consciousness of communication in the modern world, in the digital techno capital, is such that these considerations of objective taste and of discernment, they're gone out the window because they don't fit neatly within the contemporary worldview of, by and large, mega forces of images of thought, of over socialization, of equality, and so forth, that they're not convenient to what's really the main point of discourse in the modern world nowadays. They don't fit the narrative. So yeah, it's kind of late, so I'm going to end this screed. But please like, share, subscribe, comment. This is another impromptu rant. Please go and subscribe. Not subscribe. Please go and follow my boy Randy Egg Report, egg_report on Twitter. He is a brilliant mind, and thank you. And as I always say, and finally, please, I'm not doing this to deride women. I'm not saying this to like say, all women are like this, and that. I'm just saying these are larger forces that go beyond the individual existences of men and women. And I'm not doing this to like, totally dump on this like brilliant, breathtaking poet of our time, but it's just that it's a convenient example and it's another illustration of what this thread is trying to say. So as I always say, God bless and goodbye.